Hello, everyone, and welcome to Leading a Launch. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how to make launches simple, collaborative, and impactful. I'm Megan Pratt. Professionally, I've been in marketing for over a decade. And yes, I've been saying over a decade for a few years now, and probably will be for the next decade. I am a product marketing leader for startups, and I've had the great opportunity for a couple times now to be the first product marketing leader on the scene, implementing product marketing strategies, everything from messaging, positioning, sales enablement to product launch strategy, which is what we're going to discuss today. Currently, I'm a fractional product and content marketing leader working for some of the best clients in the world, in my not unbiased at all opinion. Personally, I'm the mom to two kids. I have been married for almost 13 years, and all four of us can be found enjoying our southern Utah backyard with our two dogs. Let's jump right into the content that you're here to see today. So, my goal, really simply, with this session is to give you even just a couple of things that you can implement in your product marketing strategy today to make your product launches more impactful, more productive, and really just to get you off the hamster wheel of product launches that can feel very random and can feel like maybe they're not making the impact that you'd like them to. We're going to get our hands around that today. When I talk about product launches, it really breaks down to three things for me. First of all, we have to build the launch team. We have to get the right people engaged and only the right people. And we have to understand what those people are there to do. Second, we have to tier out our launches. We have to make appropriate decisions as to what is going to be included with what launches and why we're doing those things. And we have to be able to describe that to the rest of the organization. Third, we're going to execute the launch. Sounds simple, but I think all of us here know that it's not as simple as it sounds. Keeping the train on the tracks can be a Herculean effort. That's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to share some tips, tricks, best practices, things that I've really learned the hard way and that I use in my day-to-day life now. So let's start with how we build the launch team. First of all, let's even just take a half step back from that and let's define the terms that we're using. What is the difference between a release and a launch? A release for me is something that is built, it's past QA, it's approved by product. Maybe it's even live inside of our platform today. Customers can use it. When something is launched, though, that means we've taken that out to market. We've notified customers and prospects about it, and we've really used all of the muscle that we have available to us to drive some traffic to this thing. Taking that one step further, let's look at the entire product development process. There is an entire life cycle for products outside of just the launch. And I really think it's helpful for us to understand what goes down before, during, and after these launches and releases so that we can understand where our marketing efforts fit. There's an entire discovery and development process that marketing ideally is involved with, is consulted on, but we really don't have any work to be done there unless we're helping with market research and things like that, which in my opinion, we should be. The launch is where we really take our hands around this thing and we do what we do best. We define the right audience, we tell a story about this thing, and we take it out to market. Then there's the optimization process where, again, we take a little bit of a back seat. We are still engaged, but it's really helpful for us to define this is the part that we're engaged with. This is the part that we are really taking the lead on, and it is specifically this launch process. That's why it's helpful to differentiate between releases and launches. And I do share that definition with everybody I speak with at the organizations I work with. I want people to understand that I am speaking specifically about a launch. That helps me with timelines. That helps me when people, want to understand why something's available in the product, but we haven't made a whole big to-do about it yet. So now let's talk about building that launch team. A few things that I've learned in my process is that we really have to keep that launch team small. And the reason is we need that launch team to be able to be agile. We need that team to be able to turn on a dime if necessary. And you can't do that if there's a ton of stakeholders involved. And related to that point, everybody needs to understand their job. What are they there to do? What are they contributing? What are they getting from this group? And how are we all going to work together to move this launch across the finish line? The third thing is that you really want to consult the team in the planning process. What I mean by planning process is long before there's even a launch on the table, how are you bringing that team in to the process of figuring out launch tiers, figuring out which activities need to be involved, figuring out our timelines? All of that should really be a team effort with, yes, product marketing or marketing leading that, but that should be a team effort to drive that kind of collaboration and to get that kind of consensus. Now let's move on to launch tiers. I kind of foreshadowed this a little bit, so let's take that understanding one step further. The goal of our launch tiers is really to just build expectations for timelines, activities to be completed. We want to give the organization and everybody that we work with a solid reason for the treatment that we give launches. We want to direct all of those activities that we're engaged with toward launch goals. Let me show you what I mean by sharing this matrix that I use on a day-to-day basis with product launches, now with my clients, but previously in my work as a product marketing leader inside organizations. So you can see the criteria here, but what it really boils down to is we ask ourselves two questions. Is this thing new and innovative, or is this thing meant to match the market? Is it something that's bringing us up to speed with our competitors, or is it something that is changing the game altogether? Is this thing meant to win us new customers, to build new pipeline, or is this thing meant to keep existing customers? By asking ourselves those questions, we can start to understand the type of impact that this launch will have on our organization and the type of impact it will have on our potential customers and prospects. From there, we really can start to understand how much effort we should put into this launch. So for instance, you can see here, if something is a priority one, it needs to be changing the game. It needs to be new and innovative, and it needs to have the potential to win us new customers. I use this matrix to have really concrete conversations with the product team after they've got their roadmap set up. After they understand what it is that they're building, I will look at their roadmap and say, okay, it looks to me like we have a priority one, a couple priority twos, and a priority three. How does that square up with your understanding of what it is that you're building? Oftentimes that leads to a very interesting conversation about how we're packaging things up, what stories we're telling, what they think they're building versus my understanding of the market. And we both learn a little something and have to compromise and come away from that on the same page as a team ready to take these things to market. So here's an example of how that might shake out in the actual activities that we perform. As a priority one, we're obviously going to roll out the red carpet for that thing. We're going to use all of the available channels. We're going to maybe do webinars and have web pages and ebooks, and we're going to enable the sales team. We're going to make sure that everything is prepared. We're using everything we can to give this thing the best shot of performing up to our expectations. As a result of that, that thing is going to take, in my estimation, it usually takes about 8 weeks to execute. That timeline can change depending on your resources and your activities, of course, but it helps to add a timeline associated with that. I also set the expectation that we can handle about one of these per quarter. And then you can see how that cascades down into priority twos and priority threes. Priority twos, we're using most channels. We're also very specifically defining that audience. Are the channels focused on existing customers or prospects? And that's going to take about 6 weeks to execute. And then priority threes are mostly those feature releases that are really important to keep documentation up to date, to make sure people know how to use them, to make sure our teams know that they're available, but we're not going to necessarily use all of the muscle available to us. I spoke about this a little bit earlier in my tips for building the launch team, but it's really important to use this launch plan before you even have a launch on the table as an opportunity to build consensus and to get the team ready and geared up for those launches. I meet with each person on the team or each team who will be accountable for the activities in the launch. I share with them this plan, and then we talk about their respective timelines. What are the things that they need in order to make this come to fruition? What do they need from me? What do they need from the rest of the team? What are some roadblocks that they see potentially coming up in this process? And how can we overcome those? And then we also back ourselves into a timeline. When do they think they can have specific things done? And how does that stack up with the rest of the team? And from there, I put together a bi-weekly plan that I can hold us accountable to. So for instance, week 1 is me coming to the table with a demo of the thing that is being built and the messaging and positioning. Week 2, the content marketing team has a plan for the content they'll produce. Week 4, they have some of that content produced and we're sharing it out with the team. And you can kind of see how that would build into a full plan so that by the time we actually get to the launch, there are hopefully no fires to put out. There's always something that comes up, but we're managing all of the controllables and we're making sure that our plan is solid enough that when those things do come up, we're ready to pivot because we've backed ourselves into a plan that leaves a lot of ease. It's also important to remember in this building consensus that the launch is not the only thing that these people will be accountable for during that time. So we need to leave a lot of breathing room, a lot of time for people to complete these activities, yes, and give them the creativity and focus that they need, but also keep the wheels on the bus for the rest of the activities that they're being asked to complete. Now let's talk about executing the launch. Like I mentioned up front, this sounds like something that should be pretty easy, and in some respects it is, but I think we all know that this is where some of the difficulty comes in. This is where some of the complication comes in. We've done the planning pieces. We've really set ourselves up for success. We've built a solid foundation for our launch strategy. And now it really is about keeping the wheels on. You really have done the hard part once you get to the launch execution. Once you've built out your launch team, once you've set out those tiers and you've got the rest of the team on board, once you've set your plan in motion, you've pushed the rock uphill enough that it should be fairly easy to keep it on the tracks. We've defined those launch tiers. We've really smoothed out the road for ourselves, which is the great news. I think a lot of people really skip to the launch execution part. Yes, for time's sake, because sometimes it can feel like I don't have time to be doing all this planning and setting things up. I have a launch tomorrow. That all makes sense to me. That totally that squares with my version of reality as well. But it really is important to do those planning pieces as often as you can in as meaningful of ways as you can, and even if it's biting it off in small chunks, so that when you get to this execution piece, you've really set yourself up for success. So the first part, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, during the execution, you really need to take a step back and really define and document the appropriate messaging and positioning. And this that you see on screen is the format that I use. I know everybody kind of has their favorite, but this seems to cover all the bases for me and for the teams that I've worked with. So what I'll do is I'll sit down with the product team and try to understand everything that it is that they're building, the research that they've done, and then I turn that into this messaging and positioning document. I define what this thing is, and that is a very simple 1 to 2 sentence statement that tactically defines what it is. We're not even adding any storytelling around this yet. Then I want to very specifically define who this is for. Even beyond who this is for, I want the who this is for statement to describe the job that this completes for them. So yes, we can talk about this is for, CMOs at enterprise level companies, but I want to understand what job does this complete for them. And that layers down as well into the top benefits. So top benefits is really 3, maybe 4 things that we want to talk about. These 3 things should be fairly simple to understand and describe, and these benefit statements should be pretty tactical, should be pretty specific without using a lot of very flowery creative language. We want these to be specific. We want these to be descriptive and easily at a glance understood by our audience. So then that even further cascades down into this chart that you see on the right side. So we take those benefits and we want to back them up with the features that support those things. This is really helpful when we're writing copy for web pages, when we're talking about this thing to our sales team, and we are really helping our sales, marketing, and even our customers understand how we're making these benefits come to life. Then, even more important, or I guess as important as those two things, is helping people to understand why this thing matters. This is going to come in the form of support for that. So that could be a stat for how well this thing works. 50% of people save 17 hours by using this AI-based feature, or it could be, ROI based. It could be a quote from a customer. Whatever it is that supports this benefit statement that you're making, that is what you're going to add in here. In addition to this documentation that you see here, I always like to add in, market research links or case study links. Maybe there's some content that we've produced that I want to add in here. I like to make sure that this is as full of a resource source as possible and that it's available to our launch team. And then I bring this to the launch team at the very beginning of every launch. I present this to them, and this serves as the foundation for all of the planning that we do, whether it's sales enablement, content, lead generation, etc. This is the very first thing, the very first box that needs to be checked in order for a launch to be passed off. Some quick tips for running a successful launch. I talked about how running a successful launch and executing that launch is really about keeping the train on the tracks. I've talked about my approach for a kickoff meeting. So really concretely, that is for me to share that messaging and positioning that I just spoke about, and for the product team to give us a quick demo. And then we run very quickly through the plan that everybody should be aware of and have bought off on at this point. We talk about what's coming down the road. I let them know we'll be meeting on a bi-weekly basis. I let them know where to find more information, and I let them run and get to work. Then I empower the team to ask any and all questions. I want them to poke holes in this plan. I want them to dive deeper into the messaging and positioning and interrogate some of the language that I've used to make it better. We want to, like I said, review that launch plan and those bi-weekly deliverables, make sure that's clear and doable for everyone. And then, of course, I'll host all that information in a central location where everybody can find it for the day-to-day work that they need to get done. And then we meet on a bi-weekly basis to check in on those deliverables and raise any blockers. Those bi-weekly meetings are really non-negotiable for me because it doesn't have to be long or drawn out. They just give us important checkpoints to say, this is what's done. We did complete the last 2 weeks of work that we agreed upon. This is what we need to do. Here's the next 2 weeks of work. We'll check back in 2 weeks and see where that goes. In the meantime, find me on Slack or whatever that might be. These tips really are going to help you keep the train on the tracks, help you keep things rolling down, but also help you kind of see some of those blockers before they come up, help you pivot if you need to pivot, scale back on things if something comes up, someone gets sick, resources are cut, whatever that might be. So let's wrap all of this up now. I think the thing that I notice most about us marketers is that we are very forward focused. We're always thinking about the future, the next deliverable, the next launch, the next quarter. That's by design, and that really is fantastic. That's one of our best traits. But the downside of that is that often we forget to stop and celebrate our successes. And yes, I'm saying that because it feels good to celebrate our successes. It helps us feel motivated, helps us recognize the impact that we're having. But also tactically and very realistically, if we are not stopping to recognize, document, and celebrate our successes, we're also not communicating that out to the organization, which means that the organization doesn't see our impact, which means down the line, if choices have to be made or, people start to wonder, what is marketing doing over there? that really is a problem that can be solved by stopping, letting people know the impact that we've had with these launches, even if that's a quick Slack message to, the company-wide Slack channel, celebrating the great launch, celebrating all of the work that everybody has done, and yes, tracking that back to specific KPIs. That's a critical part of this launch process that sometimes gets stepped over in an effort to just keep doing the next thing. So don't forget to stop at the end of this process. Document the metrics, document the KPIs, let people know about that, applaud yourself, and then pick yourself up and continue down on the path. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I hope you've learned 1 to 2 things that you can take into your daily life. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn for more tips like this. Best of luck out there.